When? How long, Lord? How long, Lord? The centuries come, the centuries go. When? Now! And it's joy, and it's hope fulfilled, and it's love, and it's yay, that's the thing. And that's the way it's supposed to be. That Advent is meant to be this time of, come on. And as I said at the very beginning of our Advent series, the whole world in which we live wants Christmas to be every day. They don't want you to wait. They want you to spend your money now, and they want you to spend your money tomorrow. And I just heard on the news on the way that the Retail Association was disappointed that people spent $60 per head less this year for Christmas than they did last year. And so it's been a bad Christmas for the Retail Association, but it's been a good Christmas for everybody else, because tomorrow, or Boxing Day, is that tomorrow? Yeah. Boxing Day, the sales are on, and yeah, you can buy something cheap. And so that's the real meaning of Christmas, is getting stuff cheap, right? No. So Christmas has come, and praise the Lord that He has chosen to do the thing that He has done in the form of a babe in a manger. Now, you guys know me well enough now. I've been here long enough to have instilled upon you the reality that I am not a sentimentalist. And don't mean that I have no emotions whatsoever, but I'm not really one for the vapid, empty emotionalism of stuff. I kind of want emotion to be attached to some substance, and sentimentalism is emotion attached to nothing. It's a fairy floss way of living your life, which is great for the moment, but it rots your teeth and it's not any substance. And so I have this kind of issue with sentimentalism. And if you want to be a sentimentalist, Christmas is the time to be sentimental, right? Because we are just bombarded with all these wonderful sentimental images of Christmas. I find it really interesting that we come to sing songs in carol services in Australia. Sleigh bells ring, are you listening? In the lane, snow is glistening. A happy sight, we're happy tonight, walking in a winter wonderland. Isn't that wonderful? I mean, unless you've been born in the Northern Hemisphere and anywhere that's got cold, this is a ridiculous song to sing in Australia. I remember the very first time that I was in a non-cold environment for Christmas. I was in Hawaii, and I saw this Santa Claus on a surfboard, and they were singing Mele Kalikimaka, which is the Hawaiian way for saying Happy Christmas in Hawaiian. And I thought, this is just weird. And I struggled for years and years in Australia, and even now I still struggle a bit with this idea of a hot Christmas. It doesn't make any sense. Christmas is meant to be cold, and normal people know that. And but we get real sentimental at it. So even though you live in this hot environment and were raised in this hot environment, you still want to sing, I'm dreaming of a white Christmas. Now I am, because this weather is terrible. And so, when we get this kind of sentimentalism about all these beautiful decorations and the beautiful trees and jolly Saint Nick, and sing jolly Saint Nick songs, and everything is sweet and lovely. And that's kind of okay, but it kind of makes me, because it's just too sentimental. It's not attached to anything real. And then what is this? Does anyone know what this is? What is the magic of Christmas? I mean, this gets tossed around, this idea, all the time. I actually don't know what it is. We talk about it, it's the magic of Christmas. Well, what? And then it's like stardust and sprinkly stuff. And what is actually the magic of Christmas? I'm not entirely sure. So I did a search on the internet to see if anyone knew. And no one actually knows what it actually means. Nobody can define the thing. And we just all kind of rolls off our tongues. And we have books called The Magic of Christmas, and albums by famous artists that want to sell you Christmas albums. I'm sure Taylor Swift will come out with an album called The Magic of Christmas eventually. And that's because what does it actually mean? It's pleasant decorations and wonderful getting together with family and friends, and the sheer feeling of joy one receives from giving and receiving presents. I guess maybe that's the magic of Christmas. It's kind of hard to know precisely what we're talking about in this, the magic of Christmas. And then there's this. Now, this is just 2 stills of the over 300, yes, that's right, 300 Hallmark Christmas movies. You can watch anywhere between, depending on how long the movies are, 450 to 600 hours of nonstop Christmas movies. And the amazing thing about these movies is the plot is exactly the same. It's exactly the same plot in every movie, right? The characters are different, but the two people live in a small town. He or she goes off to the big city to become a person of great career, and the other person stays behind to run the family business, and then the family business struggles. So the person who's got the big career comes back and realizes they should have been there all along, and they fall in love. And it's the same story every time. And you can spend 3 solid weeks nonstop watching these movies without rest and without sleep. And that would be the magic of Christmas if you could stay awake through any of them. Right? But this is what we do to Christmas. We turn it into this sentimental slop. Now, it's okay. I'm being flippant here. And I get some of this kind of thing. It's the nostalgia and the memories of Christmas past, which were good things, and we kind of want to connect to our childhood and remember that sheer excitement of the inability to sleep and trying to stay awake all night to just see Santa Claus come. And so we're trying to capture these kind of ideas as adults. I don't know we're doing a very good job of it. But nevertheless, this is the way we tend to approach Christmas, with this sentimentalism. The problem I have as a Christian pastor is that we sentimentalize the Christian story in the Bible as well. We do the same thing to what's going on in the Bible story. And I just want to highlight a little bit of the problem that I have with the way we sentimentalize Christmas. So here is the 3 kings of Orient are bearing gifts, they travel afar. And we get this straight out of Scripture. We saw the film where the 3 kings showed up. Now, this is a wonderful story of what God is doing by bringing to the Christ child Gentiles. He's fulfilling the promise that he made back in Daniel's writings, that the gospel was going to be proclaimed to Gentile nations. And here comes these Gentile kings, and they row up and they arrive at the Christ child. And it's a wonderful story, and it makes a great scene in a movie, and it's great for kids' plays that one of the kids can be one of the kings. The problem is the Bible never says they were kings. That's the first problem. They're actually not kings. The second problem with the story, and as wonderful it is, it never mentions that there's 3 of them. It just mentions there are wise men from the east, which means there is at least 2. So for all you wives who say men cannot be wise, there are at least 2 men in the history of human beings that were wise, and there may be more. There could have been as many as up to 20 of them. We just don't know. So we sentimentalize it because it's kind of a nice picture of the 3 wise men who show up. And the interesting thing here is that the reason they show up in the first place is because of the exiles that had gone to Babylon. And in Daniel's day, Daniel is there. They've got the scriptures. They've got the Old Testament texts. They know from Daniel, plus coupled with their astrology and so on, they work this thing out, and they show up into Jerusalem to announce to the Jewish people themselves, Gentiles announcing to Jews that their king has come. It's a glorious, wonderful story. And that's the truth of the story, but we kind of get lost in this sentimentalism. Because there's 3 gifts, we just assume there's 3 kings. And there may have been, and there's nothing wrong with thinking that, but when it becomes sentimental that it's a problem. These guys were not wise men per se. They were pseudo-religious astrologers and pseudoscience all wrapped up in one. Here's another sentimental thing that we do. And this is a really interesting picture because you would see this everywhere, and you get it instantly. You know exactly what this is. This is a stable. This is the 3 wise men, and so on. Now, the problem with this picture is that the fact that these wise men are at the birth of Christ is almost impossible to be true. They would not have arrived in time. They have seen the star. That's the story. And so when you read what's happening in Luke in chapter 2, they see, in Matthew in chapter 2, they see the star and they arrive to Herod in Bethlehem. And they come from the east and they say, "Where is the child who's been born King of the Jews?" This is Matthew chapter 2. And when the king Herod heard this, he was frightened, and in all Jerusalem with him. And calling together all the chief priests and the scribes of the people, he inquired of them where this Messiah was going to be born, and they tell him. And so he speaks to the Herod secretly, calls the wise men and learns from them the exact time when the star had appeared. So what's happened here is that these guys are at closest they are to Jerusalem is current day Baghdad. That's about 1,500 kilometers away. Or possibly as far as current-day Tehran in Persia, which is another 500 kilometers or so away. So they're anywhere between 1,500 and 2,000 kilometers away when they see this sign in the skies and decide that they're going to go see this Christ child. Now, you just think about the logistics of it. They have to organize permission to go. They have to raise the funds. They have to get the camels, the donkeys, the food stuffs that they have to collect. They have to find the myrrh, the incense, and the gold. They have to collect all that sort of stuff. And then they have to travel by foot across the desert, assuming they go across the desert and not the better route, which is all the way around to the north and back through Jordan. But if they go straight across the desert, it's going to take them, if they walk a good 30 kilometers a day, and that's a good walk. I've hiked the Bibbleman track. Walking 30 Ks a day is a good clip. If you walk 30 Ks a day, it's going to take them about 3 months to get there. Minimum, 3 months to walk, coupled with how long it took them to organize the plan. The quickest they could have got there is probably 6 months. But when you read the story a little bit later on, that Herod saw that he had been tricked by these wise men, this is Matthew 2:16, he was infuriated and sent and killed all the children in and around Bethlehem who were 2 years old or under, according to the time he had learned from the wise men. So the probability is that the wise men arrived when Jesus was 18 months old to 2 years old. It's probably when they showed up. They didn't show up at this point. Now, it's okay that you see this kind of picture, but the reality is that that's unlikely that that's the way that happened. The second problem with this picture is that Jesus is being born in a stable. And this is the common picture. And you and I get this picture of a stable because we live in Western modern thinking. And Western modern thinking is you have your lovely home, you got your acreage, and out the back is where you keep the goats, the sheep, the horses, the donkeys, whatever. They're out the back in the stable, in a yard somewhere disconnected from the house. This is not the way they lived in first century Palestine. This is a picture of a first century Palestinian home. I hope that's clear enough, it's big enough. But basically, it's upstairs is an upper room and downstairs is a lower room, and that's all there is in the home. Just this kind of thing. And they had, at the downstairs, is the place where they kept the animals to keep them warm at night. Particularly when Christ would have been born, they would have kept the animals warm underneath the property. And at the top is the room that exists for the people to live. Now, in Luke in chapter 2, in verse 7, she gave birth to her firstborn son, this is Mary, wrapped him in bands of cloth, or swaddling clothes, as you would be familiar with that language, and laid him in a manger because there was no place for them in the inn. Now you get this picture, right? We see it. Every kid's play. There's the innkeeper and his wife. No room in the inn for you. Slam the door in their face. Go out to the stable out the back. So out they go to the stable in the back. That's the story we tell ourselves. But think about the reality of what's actually going on here. This is a census. Joseph has returned to Bethlehem, where he is from. This is his hometown. He is duty-bound and honor-bound to go to his family home where he lived when he was a child, or to his aunts or his uncles. You get this. He's not walking into a town that he has no connection with. It's not like you and I going to some place in, I don't know, Turkey or someplace you don't live, and wandering into this Turkish town and then having to connect to a hotel and there's no room in the hotel. We don't work like that in Palestine. He's arriving to the place, he has family. He's arrived to the family home. So then what is this inn? Well, the interesting thing about the word inn is it's the same word that Jesus used when he told his disciples to go find an upper room in which to hold the Lord's Supper. It's exactly the same word. It's the upper room. It's the room at the top of the house. So the proper understanding of what's going on, when you think about the culture of what's happening and the reality of what's happening, these are not cold-hearted people who are going to make a woman have a baby out in a stable disconnected from a house. These are human beings. They know what birth is like and babies are like. They're not cruel. They arrive at a home. Maybe it's his parents' home. Maybe it's a cousin's home. Maybe it's his aunt and uncle's home. Maybe it's whoever's home. But he's connected by family to this home. They arrive. They arrive late. She's pregnant. How long did it take on a donkey with a pregnant woman to arrive in time for the census? So they get there late. The upstairs is full. There is no room in the inn, the upper floor. So where do they let her have this child? Downstairs. And where do they put the baby? In a manger that's under the house. But it's really important that we get this picture here, because otherwise we have this very sentimental but disconnected from truth picture of what's really going on. One writer said that the thinking that they were in a stable away from others, alone and outcast, is grammatically and culturally implausible. It's unlikely that this ever could have happened, because this was his family home that he had gotten to. One writer named Chad Bird put a nice little meme on his page that says, "God hangs out in inhospitable spots. He chooses God-forsaken places as the venues in which to teach his people that he won't forsake them." And he was using the picture of Jesus in a stable at the back of some house somewhere as his proof. Now, it's true that God absolutely will hang out in inhospitable spots. Sometimes he does, and sometimes he doesn't. And we don't lock him into a room this way. There's another writer named Dick France in a book called We Proclaim the Word of Life, and this is what he said about Jesus and the stable. The problem with the stable is that it distances Jesus from the rest of us. It puts even his birth in a unique setting, in some way as remote from life as if he had been born in Caesar's palace. But the message of the incarnation is that Jesus is one of us. He came to be what we are, and it fits well with that theology that his birth, in fact, took place in a normal, crowded, warm, welcoming Palestinian home, just like many other Jewish boys of his day, because he came to be one of us. Jesus led a normal human life, and this is important. We want Jesus to be unique, but sometimes I think the more unique we try to make him, the less human he actually starts to become. And then Jesus starts to become the form of myth. He's kind of like Superman or Thor or some other kind of person. And this is what happens when we sentimentalize the text, is that Jesus stops being as human as the Bible is trying to make it tell us that he really is. And there's somehow he's superhuman. He's super Jesus. To demonstrate to you how sentimental we can get about all of this, think about what you think about when I say these words to you. Jesus soiled his nappies. You immediately, blasphemy. And yet to suggest that he didn't is blasphemous, because he was fully human. And baby humans soil their nappies. Little George Jesus, no crying he makes. Maybe sometimes he didn't cry, but I can bet you he cried a whole lot when he went hungry, because babies cry. And if you don't know that, wait until you have one. And it scandalizes us when we think of how human Jesus was, because we want him to be superhuman. We want him to be super Jesus. And when we isolate him away and sentimentalize the whole story, he somehow becomes far more unique than we need him to be, because we need our Savior to be human. We want to sanitize it and get rid of the myths and so on, but that's not why I'm highlighting these things to you. I don't want you to walk away from here today with a big head saying, "Oh, now I know how it really works. My pastor really explained it to me. You fools are, believe in all this sentimentalism, but Jesus was really born downstairs from a house. See, I got it all figured out because my pastor is smarter than you." That's not why I'm telling you this. I'm encouraging you about these things because we need to understand it is the fullness of the humanity of Jesus that makes the Christmas story so stunning. It's the absolute normality of the human life of Jesus that makes the story so stunning. It's the very ordinariness of Jesus' life that makes the incarnation so miraculous. I think about what it would mean to become a cat for the sake of my cat, or to become a chicken for the sake of my chickens. As a human being, for better or for worse, for all my flaws and my gifts and my failures, I'm far superior, I'm far more glorious than my cat. But if I really, really loved my cat and was able to somehow become like a cat, then I would have to be born as a kitten I would have to be licked by a mother cat, be cleansed from a mother cat. I would have to learn to use a litter tray, and I would have to, and yes, close your ears if you can't handle it, learn to lick my privates to keep myself clean. This is scandalous to do this. Why would a glorious human being choose to become a cat? Or maybe worse, choose to become a chicken and scratch around in the dirt and peck and lay eggs? And yet, if I loved chickens that much, I'm prepared to scandalize myself and the whole truth to become one of you. This is what God is doing. And we need to grasp the scandalous nature of the fullness of the humanity of Jesus and not turn him into super Jesus. Was Jesus poor when he was born? Because we want him to be poor, because then he associates with the poor. But then what good is he to the rich? We want Jesus to be rich? Well, then what good is he to the poor? But Jesus was just right down there in the middle. And when he went into ministry, he got poor. Ask anyone who goes into ministry and they'll tell you they'll go poor. But before he went into ministry, he had a job, he had a career, he was making a living, he was eking out of existence, he was feeding himself and his family, and he was doing the kinds of stuff carpenters do. He wasn't rich, he wasn't poor, he was normal. He was living a normal human life. And he's living a normal human life and experiencing the fullness of a normal human life in order to save us. Because we need a fully human, normal human God to do this thing. It's in the ordinariness of his life that is both scandalous and miraculous. In order to redeem mankind, Jesus needs to experience mankind from beginning to end. I'm going to quote you from Athanasius, and Athanasius was an old church founder, church father. And he said this: the Lord did not come, meaning Jesus, to make a display. He came to heal and to teach suffering men. For one who wanted to make a display, the thing would have been just to appear and dazzle the beholders. That is to say, if Jesus just wanted to put on a display, he could have showed up at any time and look at me, lights and shining and flashes, and put on a marvelous, wonderful display. But for him who came to heal and to teach, the way was not merely to dwell here, but to put himself at the disposal of those who needed him, and to be manifested according as they could bear it, not spoiling the value of the divine appearing by exceeding their capacity to receive it. His point he's meeting is that in order for us to really comprehend God, God could not have come in such a way it would have exceeded our capacity to understand it. And so he takes on the capacity of humanity. My cats really want to understand me. The last thing they needed me to put on a brilliant display. They need me to become a cat. If human beings really want to understand what God is like, God needs to come and take on human flesh. God so loved the world that he gave. God so loved the world that he came. God so loved the world that he became. And it's the becoming that is scandalous. And yet it's the becoming that is so necessary for our salvation. And so Christmas is a season of hope and joy and peace and love divine, because in the Christ child we see the fulfillment of the promise of God to restore all things to himself and to return shalom and life to those who dwell in darkness, of the darkness of lies and of its death. This is your Savior. This is your God. And in this we marvel. Merry Christmas.
All right. Thank you very much, Keith. We've now come to our last song of the day, so let's stand and worship the Lord with this beautiful song.